let's talk about Justice Bridge and what you've done there, because it's amazing. I mean, I know there's many legal incubators across the country, but Justice Bridge is a super success from all I can see. So would you mind just like telling, speaking a bit about the organization and the history, its mission, that sort of thing?
Well, it's you mentioned a lot of law incubators in the country. There are 70 of them.
Wow. Yeah.
But I think our hallmark is our mentor network. That's the thing I'm most proud of. But we were privileged to launch about 6 years ago. We processed about 9,000 matters at this time, and helped a lot of folks. But it's really twin goals. One, to nurture and support these attorneys, empower them so that these solo practitioners, who are not really alone, they're not solo, they've got a community of support, but also to increase access to justice.
Right. Now, what's interesting about your organization, you guys figured out a way to get office space, not just in, I think, Dartmouth, right, where you first started, or down the South Shore, but also in Boston, downtown Boston.
Yeah, we actually started in Boston
in
August of 2014. And then about 6 months or so later, got the office space in New Bedford, close to the law school, UMass School of Law, which is our primary supporter.
Right. That's fantastic. You actually brought me, I don't know if you remember, but we went to lunch. You and I went to lunch a few years ago, and we met downtown, and you brought me into the Boston location, and it was cool. I mean, you have so many mentors that you actually have like a rotation, like a schedule, right? Because we walked in the door and there was a lawyer mentor there, just like waiting for the next attorney to walk in. Can you talk a bit about how that works?
Well, I think it really is just such a great thing. We're this postgraduate residency program, and these folks they're essentially solo and small firm practitioners, so they don't have partners as lawyers would in large firms there to help guide them on individual cases. So the more that we can have mentors in residence. Before COVID-19 struck in the pandemic, we had about 20 mentors coming in routinely in the two offices on a scheduled basis. That has had to give away to the realities of the pandemic, because when you talk about having over 30 years of legal experience, a number of retired judges in this program, they're in that high risk category,
right?
In terms of their age. So we have to be careful, but we do a lot virtually now. We have a grand rounds every week where a number of the mentors join, a number of the attorneys, and it's a virtual world. We use the platforms like your wonderful app. It's just anything that we can do to help provide more efficient service and directly get to consumers. Yeah,
the world's changing for sure. So how would you explain, what your organization's role in the community? How do you really fit in?
Well, from the community standpoint, we help modest means clients. And so we've kind of targeted that group where the need is unmet. And there are just a lot of people who fall in that category. These are folks going through life-changing legal issues. It may be their immigration status, the right to stay in this country, the right to see their kids and family law, the roof over their heads, bankruptcy, those kinds of cases, and they don't have a lawyer to shepherd them. And so to the extent that we can provide those lawyers and be targeted to that population, that's what we do. That's what we're all about.
Right. And what are your practice areas that you're covering now, Len?
Pretty much everything in civil law.
Mm-hmm.
We don't solicit, because people are entitled to attorneys in criminal law. If it's a felony, if it's a serious charge, so the unmet need is the greatest in civil law.
Yeah.
And again, these are every bit as significant impact on people's lives as criminal law in so many instances. But we're there to help. If folks are willing to pay something for services, we're willing to tailor that something based on the guidance of our mentors and the services of our attorneys.
Right, that's great. So how have the needs of the population that you serve, how have you seen those change during the COVID crisis?
Well, sadly, we were designed, Damian, for modest means clients, and there are just a lot more of them. I mean, that's kind of a general overview, but that's clearly there are a lot of people hurting. There are a lot of employment matters now. There are a lot of government benefit issues that have arisen. Bankruptcies, consumer debt cases have worsened. We were spared. Our second largest area of work is in housing law. And there was a moratorium, of course, for a period of time during the COVID era, but now we're starting to see that lifted as well. And those cases are starting to increase. So,
Yeah.
And basically in all of these areas, the need is just increasing because of the economic impact of this pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a strange time. It's November 10th as we have this discussion, Len, and we're hearing yesterday and the day before that there might be a vaccine coming down the road, but it's probably going to be months and months before it's available, if that's what happens. It's really hard to, for you, I would say, someone in your position, but I think all of us, really hard to really foresee exactly what's going to happen. But do you have a sense, like in your mind, of how things will evolve, like how the needs of the people you serve will evolve over the next year?
Yeah, I really try to stay in touch a little bit with the medical, information. One of my sons is an emergency room doctor, actually, in Philadelphia, treating, COVID patients. And he is a bit reticent about vaccines and the fact that there are multiple strains. And so vaccines may not address some of the strains. This is going to be, and in terms of my planning, I'm thinking that this is something that's going to be around a long time, even if there is a specific vaccine that has some positive results.
Right.
It's not all bad news, though, in the sense that the courts are relying more on virtual platforms, conducting virtual hearings. That's a positive, actually, in the sense that if the schedules are tighter, the logistics of travel are reduced for folks. So to the extent that the courts have been able to pivot, we've been able to pivot with the courts. And maybe that can increase access to justice and remove some of the costs and some of the barriers of travel and such. So it's not all bad news, but we need to adapt.
Yeah, no, I think in that respect, you're right. I think things could advance. Because even in my own family law practice, when it comes to going to a hearing and representing a client, we save clients money, at that stage of the game, because we're going in. We're only billing the client for 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever it is that we're actually on the Zoom hearing or the telephone hearing, as opposed to driving down to the courthouse and waiting there. And, so from that regard, it's an access justice improvement, but we need, to really get there, the courts need to be able to handle the capacity that they were handling before. So I guess it's to be seen how that will go.
Well, and I'm curious, just based on your practice, with our modest means client base,
right,
we always try to get to resolution sooner rather than later. Have you found that people are maybe a little more amenable to an informal and a quicker, more expeditious resolution on some of their matters? Or
it depends. It depends on the case, and it depends on the personalities. And I think with family law in particular, we really feel the different types of ways people make decisions in our practice. Some people are very emotionally based in their decision-making practices, and some are not. Some are more rational and will think things out. Some are more impulsive. So, I think with those that tend to be on the more rational, less impulsive end of the spectrum and more pragmatic, they're going to say, well, look, we don't want to wait 2 years to go to trial on a case. What's the point of that? When they've spent a little money, they've felt the pain of spending a little money, and they're like, what, let's just resolve the case, and people become more receptive. But then there's cases that, are difficult to resolve either way. If you have a parental child relocation case where the kids are going to move across the country, that's hard. That's like a win-lose case. So that's hard to settle no matter how long it's going to take. So, and then there's an incentive, the incentives shift for resolving things. Sometimes in family law, the longer something is the status quo, the better for one of the parties, or, So I think we kind of see all dynamics, but I do appreciate the cost savings for sure.
Yeah, well, and I just think, family law is our largest area as well. And it's always helpful to try to get to an amicable resolution if you can, sooner rather than later. There's certainly a cost, and I think there's an emotional toll aspect too, because few people say, boy, this was a really therapeutic, going through this protracted litigation was a really therapeutic thing for me.
Right.
That's not the case, but I think the other thing is, to the extent that the parties can control their destiny a little bit rather than litigate
Yeah,
the matter and have a judge, even if it's a well-meaning judge, well-informed, well-educated by the attorneys, it still is a stranger who is going to inherently be less familiar with the
right.
particular nuances of your visitation schedules and your lifestyle needs and such. And if you can be creative and carve your own private result and come to that judgment among yourselves, it's preferable than just, I don't want to say throwing the dice,
Right.
but having a judge decide something where it could go either way. You just have less control over the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a lawyer as well, I mean, there's so much you don't know. There's so much unknown going into that process that can be scary. And and you probably know in family law, it's like 80% of people are unrepresented,
I know.
which is such a shockingly high number. I mean, I was talking with another colleague, another lawyer the other day, and I gave that statistic, and he practices business law, and his kind of immediate response was like, well, maybe those people don't want lawyers.
Mm,
And I was like, well, I mean, there probably is some portion of that of people who don't want lawyers, but 80% is quite a large number, particularly when, people's children's like child custody, their financial stability. If I had these issues, I'd tell you what, I'd get a lawyer, just because there's too much on the line. So it's hard. I really do think it's that economic barrier, and you're doing a lot, and a lot of people are doing a lot to try to fight that off. So, well, let me ask you, Len, do you have a sense? I mean, people have different perspectives and philosophies on where their organization is going, but do you have a sense of where Justice Bridge is going to be in 5 years, where you want it to be?
well, I think, we've been talking about tech platforms and such, and the
Yeah.
court's going into a more virtual mode. And I think that's just going to be, clearly the pandemic nudged courts in that direction.
Yeah.
But, and that is a positive development, but I think we all need to do that. We all need to adapt as much as possible and utilize technology. You hear that in all businesses, leveraging technology. Well, what does that really mean? Well, the app that you're developing, we're developing and have been for almost 2 years, an app as well that's a form builder and
Mhm.
provides different information so that people can self-help
Yeah.
to some degree. I think the other key for us is limited scope representation. We haven't talked about that, but just
Yeah.
it's to define it, in the broadest terms, it means that attorneys are not involved in the entirety of litigation or representation. They pick and choose their spots where they can have the most impact.
Right.
And when we're serving a modest means client base that might otherwise not be able to afford traditional rates at all for any attorneys, we pick and choose. We do this limited scope representation. That again is where the mentors come in to help guide that process. I think we're going to see more and more of that. That only became an option about 20 years ago in our state, and it took a while for it to really catch on. But I think it's developing more and more in all of our courts. And in fact, I think in the Superior Court, it wasn't except until last year that the Superior Court, they might have had some model test programs, pilot programs, but I think they finally implemented just last year. So we haven't seen how that can fully play out. And I think that's a lot of that is our future.
I agree with you. And I think because there's really, you can't lower your hourly rate to $5 an hour. You can't lower, there's some certain threshold that you just can't go below, or you're not going to cover your own costs. So the only other way to really parse it for the consumer is to help consumers here and there. I think one big challenge is making that process very efficient. And I think if you can automate that within your own app, or if others can automate that process of doing that paperwork where you're making your notice of limited appearance and your withdrawal, and that's down to a push of a button, I think that would go a long way. And there's a lot of solos out there doing LAR work. And if it's printing off a piece of paper and it's signing it and it's having the client sign it and then scan it and then going through all that, you're already charging a lower amount. And so it's cutting into that precious profit margin that you have left. So that needs to be made efficient. Well, good. So, and how many lawyers do you have on your panel right now?
So we have 20 at
Great.
the moment. And we've graduated about 30 at this point, and a number of
Wow.
them stay on in our community as they become peer mentors. I'm
Hmm.
not including them in our 82 mentor base right now, but it's we're trying to develop a community, and it is again a really a great blessing to have so many community partners. You've been a great partner in that process too. You've been helpful for us, and the MBA is a wonderful partner. They offer us free bar association memberships
Yep.
for our members. Anything that we can do to take on what is really a daunting challenge.
Yeah.
There are more and more people in need. As you say, it's 80 to 90% in some of these courts,
Yeah.
pro se representation. And maybe some percentage of those folks want to do this on their own. They feel that it's, just kind of like the Home Depot and
Mhm.
other kinds of services. I can do this, on my own, but you don't know what you don't know. And there are points where it's really critical to have the guidance of an experienced specialist in that particular area. I think limited scope representation, by the way, I'll just return to that subject for just one second. I think limited scope representation is great from the lawyer's standpoint as well as the clients. From the clients, it saves them money and it makes legal services affordable. From the lawyer's standpoint, you're being more strategic. You're involved where you can really have the most impact. You're the thought visionary on that case and
Mhm.
helping guide and direct that case to the best possible outcome and involved in the most important stages of that case and not in the more routine matters. And so that in an educated, informed way, that sharing of roles, I think is really critical, but it's a very attractive role for lawyers to be involved just in that strategy
Right.
aspect.
Do you think the justice gap is eventually going to be eliminated? Are we going to figure this out?
We're going to keep trying, but as we try, in a single word, I think a law incubator like us, we're a laboratory. We're trying to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
And I don't pretend to say after 6 years that we've figured it all out. We just keep pivoting with circumstances. No one anticipated a pandemic, and so as we've just had with COVID-19, you have to keep whittling away at it.
Yeah.
And we have been. It's there's an old metaphor about starfish on a beach that is littered with thousands of starfish, and there's a young boy, and he's throwing them one at a time back into the ocean. And an old man comes up to the child and says, "Son, look at this beach littered with starfish. You're never going to be able to do this. Why are you bothering? And what difference does it make?" And as he throws, the child throws one more starfish in the water, he said, "Well, it made a difference to that one." And that's what we're all after is
Yeah.
making a difference, and it's kind of one case at a time. But
Love it.
to the extent we can look at it in a broader way, we chip away and do the best we can.
And I think that perseverance and dedication is what's going to get us there eventually.
Absolutely. You're a part of that effort, most certainly. This app is, and all your great work with the MBA. We just keep plugging away.
Well, so we got one last question for you, Len. What does justice mean to you?
Justice is giving those people the opportunity, for a fair result that's affordable and efficient and as amicable as possible. How do we get people to a fair resolution of their case? I think someone wants to find out. I can't attribute it to the actual source, but it's resolving disputes short of fighting, short of a pugilist actually warring. How do we seemingly irreconcilable differences resolve them and in a fair, equitable way?
Yeah. I mean, I tell people that, the reason the lawyers are involved to begin with is because the problems became too big for the people who have them. And they can't figure them out, and they need our help. So, well, you're doing amazing work, Len. I appreciate everything you do. I know everyone appreciates everything you do. We have, in Massachusetts, I will tell you what, I mean, because Melina and I have been looking at organizations nationwide and state by state. And this app that we have together, we're piloting it in Massachusetts and launching in Massachusetts, but it's a nationwide app, and we have 4,000 organizations already loaded into it.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, when we're in Massachusetts, where we have tons of organizations here. You go to a lot of states, and there's like 3. You know, I mean, it's not the same. And if you sit back and think about, some of it is like kind of mirrors the political landscape, and some of it is just, resources. Massachusetts has exceptional resources here. So, but I think we'll keep working away at it, and I'm excited. I'm excited you're part of it, and I can't wait to see where we go and where you go, and we'll have to sit down again in a year maybe and have another one of these.
Oh, would love to. Would love to. I mean, it really is an ongoing process for sure. And you talk about Massachusetts. It is a great place for innovation. I don't know if we started the country here.
Yeah. I heard that.
Look at it from a nostalgic. It's just sort of in our blood. To be experimenters and to lead revolutions, peaceful ones and creative ones and entrepreneurial ones, as well as warring ones. But I think that all the colleges and universities, there's just something about the environment that is conducive to these kinds of ventures. Yeah. To not just accepting the situation as it is, but looking to go further and to experiment. And so you're in a great place for what you're doing as well, because it's kind of an appropriate home for your app.
Well, let's keep at it. All right, Len. Well, I really appreciate you talking and taking some time. We finished within a half an hour. Beautiful.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And again, thanks for all that you're doing to increase access to justice, Damian.
You too.